Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Go 24/7 podcast. We are getting into the heart of SEC play, the first SEC game inside Tiger Stadium. We're talking about it today. If you're listening on podcast form, Spotify, Apple, wherever you might get it, we appreciate you. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. The numbers are continuing to climb. We just passed 3,500. I thought I could do numbers there, but words are hard sometimes. But 3,500 subscribers. We're just going to keep it at that. But hey, it's a lot of fun. Glenn West, Dylan Sanders. My name is Bryce Koon. Thanks so much for tuning in. Guys, Arkansas week is here. It's got a lot of history with this matchup. They've placed it earlier in the season, a night game in Death Valley. Hey, look, Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit are making the trip to broadcast this one. A lot of eyes going to be on this game as we get ready to preview it. And we start with the LSU offense. We all know what they did against Mississippi State. Malik Neighbors, the Jaden Daniels Malik Neighbors show. I also want to throw in the name Brian Thomas, who's just quietly continued to put together solid week-to-week performances. That being said, Glenn, we'll start with you here. This LSU offense faces a new challenge against a defensive front for Arkansas that has a lot of experience. They only allowed 281 yards last week in the loss to BYU. It's still a solid defense. How do you feel about this offense walking into Tiger Stadium on Saturday night?
I don't know how you can't be impressed with what we've seen the last couple of weeks from this offense. I think they've made some real positive strides in terms of just how they're executing, how they're operating, who they want to get involved in this offense, and I think probably the biggest thing here is going to be the battle in the trenches. I've written about it some this week. I know that Dylan touched on it earlier when looking at Arkansas, that this is a pretty formidable defensive front. I mean, you're looking at a team right now that I think is top 10 in tackles for loss. They're getting into the backfield. They're wreaking havoc on teams when they're able to get back there. Landon Jackson, a former LSU Tiger and guy who's had some really good success now over at Arkansas, is I think among the top 3 or 4 players in the country who is getting in the backfield for on a consistent basis. I think he has about 6 tackles for loss on the season. So I'm going to be really looking at this LSU offensive line. I think there's been some up and down play. I'm not going to go out and say that this has been a completely underwhelming unit, but I think that they have certainly shown some room for improvement. I think a lot of people expected that they would kind of come in with some of the continuity that they had from last year and just kind of really be able to build on the finish of last season. And it's just it's a little harder to do that. And I think that they have gone through some growing pains as a group. I think you've seen kind of them toy with some very different ideas. I think the Zalance Hurd experiment at right tackle, was kind of a little bit more of a mixed review, I think, last week at Mississippi State, and I think that extends inside to obviously what Emory Jones was doing at guard. I think there were a couple series there where he really struggled, and that there at the same time, this is also a unit that was able to keep Jaden Daniels upright to have a pretty historic performance on Saturday. So I don't want to take too much out of of what the offensive line has done well, but they're probably going to face one of their more physical defensive lines of the season. I mean, we talked with Charles Turner on Tuesday, and he talked about them having a very physical D line, and it's going to be one of the tougher units that they face this season. And I think it's just going to be a really big challenge for LSU. This is a game coming in where LSU was favored by at least 2 touchdowns. I mean, I've seen 17, 18-point favorites out there for LSU. I think it's going to be a little tougher than that. And just listening to Brian Kelly's comments this week on Monday and on Wednesday, I think he's put that message into his players that this is not going to be an easy kind of run-of-the-mill game. I mean, the last 3 contests between these 2 teams have been decided by a total of 9 points. And I think that LSU coming in and just expecting that they're gonna win is exactly how they got kind of beat in that Florida State game. I think this is going to be a great test for that competitive edge that Ryan Kelly has talked about these last couple weeks, and LSU being closer to finding that identity that they feel like is going to lead to success on the field. So it's going to be a really important week, I think, to kind of test that out and see just kind of where these guys' minds are at heading into a really important stretch here of their conference schedule.
Yeah, you mentioned, the mentality. I think that's something that we both saw and all of us saw in that Florida State game. It feels like that's been corrected, and you mentioned some of the things that Charles Turner said. He said it feels like we always play with an edge, but it's something that Coach Brad Davis has challenged us coming in to SEC play, and it's something he even said. He said, we didn't have that. We didn't necessarily have that. They punched us in the mouth. Now we're trying to punch others in the mouth. So, Dylan, when you look at this offense, I mean, so explosive in that game against Mississippi State, but I think just my opinion, I want to get your thoughts on it. Can they do the same thing? Like, is Arkansas going to learn not to play man coverage against Malik Neighbors? Because that did not work for Mississippi State in any category, in any sphere last weekend.
I mean, if you look at the Arkansas defense and their brand is it's like aggressiveness, so maybe not. That was Sam Pittman before the season talked to. He's like, I had to get a little used to how aggressive like he teaches the defensive backs to be. So if they're trying to man up Malik Neighbors, I'm fine. I think that they actually match up pretty well with this defense. If I say so myself. They gave up less than 300 yards, but that's easy. It's a little bit easier to do whenever your offense is giving BYU the ball near midfield or in Arkansas territory to start drives half the time. I think that just as much as this is a new challenge for LSU's offense, this is a new challenge for Arkansas's defense. Because they haven't played anyone like Jaden. They haven't played any offensive line that's very impressive in my opinion. Like BYU gave up like 7 tackles for a loss against Southern Utah. Mm-hmm. So like this is a new challenge for Arkansas, and personally, I don't feel I feel better about LSU covering like a 17-point spread against Arkansas than I did about them covering like 8 points against Mississippi State or whatever it was. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that I think LSU should handily win this game. Just looking at Arkansas and how they are and how their team's built, I think that LSU should be able to do well. I feel like they match up pretty well with this team. I feel like they have the athletes. I feel like Jaden's athleticism is something like Keaton Slovis didn't have. And Logan Diggs, could have a good game. BYU is still able to run the ball a little bit. I feel like they match up well. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think this offense and Trey Biddy, we had a great episode with him, kind of behind enemy lines. Glenn's going to be doing some VIP questions, just about this Arkansas team, and he mentioned, the Arkansas side of things, they feel good about defensively where they are. Now, obviously, coming in, he's mentioned kind of what Dylan said. They haven't faced anyone to the ability of what Jaden Daniels can do, and the confidence that he was able to get last week could pose a problem because I think that we all saw, and we'll move to the defense here shortly, but I think that we all saw it's not an ability problem for Jaden Daniels to get down the field. It might be in between the years, having the confidence and needing to get down the field like that. And so he showed that, against Mississippi State, that he could do that. And so if they can spread this Arkansas team out, I think it really limits to what that front seven really could do against you. They got a lot of new faces on the back end. It kind of feels like, after talking with Trey, some Mississippi State folks the previous week, it feels like there's very few secondaries in the SEC that had a lot of continuity coming into 2023. LSU obviously a big part of that as well.
Yeah, like you said, Bryce, I think another big part of this is how they've continued to incorporate Brian Thomas into this mix as well. He had 8 targets last week. I think he had 142 yards in the Florida State game as well. Having a complement like that to what Malik Neighbors is capable of doing, I think really stretches a defense even thinner. They're going to have their hands full. Dwight McLaughlin's a pretty solid corner. We know him from his days back at LSU, but to Dylan's point, they haven't faced an offensive team like LSU, and I probably should have mentioned that a little bit on the outset of my answer as well, but I think LSU has a lot of these weapons that can really turn a game around, and then I would certainly put Thomas in that category. I would put Neighbors and Logan Diggs, Caleb Jackson. I would love to see him continue to get some kind of a defined role in this backfield. I think just every time Jackson touches the ball, he's just extremely explosive, and I think that there's something to that, and I think that they want to continue to have that aspect of things feed off of him, and I would really lean into it being more of a Diggs Jackson kind of backfield this weekend and really see what that looks like. I know Brian Kelly's been a little bit hesitant to maybe throw the freshman out there for a significant role because of maybe some of the limitations he has in the pass blocking game. But if you really want to get this run game going, and I think that they've shown that they're trying to do that, trying not to make it just a Jaden Daniels / whoever kind of gets going kind of game, then I think Jackson needs to be more involved. I think that you can certainly incorporate guys like Josh Williams in on third down for pass blocking situations, but I would like to see a little bit more of Caleb Jackson going forward personally.
One of the less talked about changes that they made that I think made a big impact was throwing Chris Hilton out there a lot more. Chris Hilton played a lot of snaps, and he maybe didn't get a ton of targets, but having that speed out there forces the defense to try and give you an answer. So if you have a team trying to not let Chris Hilton beat them over the top, that's going to open things up for a Brian Thomas and a Malik Neighbors. And I think that was a really nice new wrinkle that we saw. And then Kyron Lacy did come in maybe in more like run blocking downs and short yardage situations, but having Chris Hilton play a bigger role in terms of just kind of being a decoy, even, I think helped out a lot. So I think that we're seeing the team kind of understand their personnel a little bit more over the past couple of weeks. So I think that's been a nice improvement that we've seen.
Yeah, and like we talked about, it all kind of goes into potentially spreading out an Arkansas defense pretty thin. And I do agree with what both you guys said, especially with the potential continued absence of Mason Taylor. And what does that look like? Mac Markway didn't look fantastic necessarily in this game. Both he and Kamorian Pimpton, I think, still have a long ways to go, but that's okay.
Taylor might play. I think Taylor will probably
if Taylor
play.
plays, it's going to be fine.
Yeah,
and it's
I think
even more
the
dangerous.
guys, that Kelly had said were kind of probable coming into this. I mean, I think you got to take it with a grain of salt after kind of what happened last week when Taylor was listed as probable. But I think that they just wanted to be pretty cautious with those guys. And so I do expect Taylor, Omar Spates, and then there was a third one in there too, who's I'm blanking on right now. But there's going to be three guys that I think he listed as probable that are going to play.
Yeah.
Ogofu, yes, right. Ogofu is going to play, I think so.
I think all three of us said his name differently.
Ogofu, isn't it?
It's Ogofu. Yeah, it's Ovi. Come on, guys, just call him Ovi. That's what we got to roll with.
Ovi.
No, but look, that brings up a great topic to turn our attention to this defense now. I mean, look, guys, they dominated. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. Now, I do want to pump the brakes a little bit. I think that Mississippi State, due to obviously the tragic situation of last season and Mike Leach, they're trying to overhaul everything. They wanted to stay in-house defensively, which is, I think, a great idea for them. They bring in Kevin Barbay, and I think, Glenn, we could see there in person, they're still not very comfortable. Will Rogers didn't look like the Will Rogers I expected. I think Glenn expected either. So, while it was a dominating effort, I think Arkansas goes through spells kind of like Mississippi State did where they just can't move the ball. But KJ Jefferson is still a weapon. Rocket Sanders is a guy that, Trey Biddy said on the podcast, the Behind the Lines, he doesn't expect him to go this week. That's a really big missing piece of this Arkansas offense and probably one of the best backs in the country when you get down to numbers, pure numbers standpoint. But KJ Jefferson's still a weapon. They still have some guys they can do some damage with. So, Dylan, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Glenn. This defense for LSU, can they continue to dominate the way that they did against Mississippi State? Is it going to kind of come more towards the average, the mean of this situation?
I feel like it's going to – they're going to not – I don't think they're going to look as good. I don't think they're going to keep them to 0.4 yards a play for a half, but
Yeah.
So it'll probably look a little bit more average. One thing to note about this Mississippi State, this Arkansas team, is that their wide receivers are tall, and we've seen what happens. Now they're not Johnny Wilson or Keon Coleman, I think, on a talent level, and I don't think Arkansas would even try and tell you that they're like some of the best receivers in the country, but they're big and they're capable, like JUCO athletes.
Mhm.
So yeah, they're capable, and then they have Jaden Wilson, who is like a homegrown SEC player. So they're looking new. They have a freshman tight end. They're looking different than they did last year, but they have some big targets. So LSU again is going to have their hands full with having 5'10" DBs try and guard 6'4" receivers every play. So that will give them some wins, and that gives them an edge that they might not have against another team. So that is, I think, the biggest thing to watch is, were they getting beat so bad because Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson were tall, or was it because they're really good? And not that these Arkansas receivers are slouches; they're just not like that level on paper that you're going to be facing. So it's going to be, maybe like, we even saw Grambling have some receivers, Moss, Denver Harris in the end zone, and go over some guys. So it's going to be I think that's the biggest thing to watch on the LSU defensive side. I think LSU should be able to win in the trenches. I don't think that's even a question against this team. They have some younger guys, and then some guys that LSU has had success against in the past on the offensive line. I think LSU does not really have an excuse to lose the battle in the trenches this time around. I'm going to be interested in how the secondary responds to once again facing a really big wide receiver core.
Yeah, 6'4" Andrew Armstrong, 6'4" Isaac Tesla, Jaden Wilson in there in the slot. I wanted to also mention before we throw it to you, Glenn, AJ Green has filled in nicely for Rocket Sanders, but another weapon out of the backfield. How do you see this defense matching up, especially on that back end, Glenn, or just in general?
Yeah, I'll probably take it from a defensive line perspective. I think that you have to build on what you had last weekend. And to Dylan's point, I think LSU, one of the concerns with Arkansas, at least early in the season offensively, has been its offensive line, and particularly in its pass rush. They haven't been able to really keep KJ Jefferson upright. I know he's been pressured a lot early in this season, and that's not something you really would expect with a Sam Pittman coach team. Offensive line is kind of his specialty, his background. So I think they're still trying to figure some things out there. And I think it's a great opportunity for LSU to kind of take advantage of this. I mean, like we mentioned, sounds like Ovi Gofu is going to be back into this lineup. You're going to mix him in with Braden Swinson at Jack. You're going to have full stable of defensive tackles, whether it's Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo, Jordan Jefferson, Paris Shan, and a couple Jacobian Guillory, of course. So there's going to be a lot of subs. I would imagine LSU keeps it pretty routine with its substitutions at those positions, and what we've seen here over the last week, I mean, just is not only are the defensive line, but the linebackers really seem to be kind of coming into their own, finding a little bit more of a consistency with the way that Whit Weeks played last weekend. I think you can really lean into him and certainly what Greg Penn brings to the table. Brian Kelly spoke glowingly about Greg Penn and Whit Weeks this week. So you're probably going to incorporate Omar Spates into this to some degree, but I just don't know how those two played last weekend. You can't lean into those guys the most. I think that those two deserved to earn the majority of the playing time at inside linebacker. You can continue to be versatile with the way you're using Harold Perkins. I think that they're getting closer to what you saw from Perk last year, in terms of his role and how he's going to be most effective on this team. Arkansas game was a big one for him last year. We all know that. And so, we'll see if he can continue to have that kind of success against this team this go around. But it's going to be different. I mean, you're going against a guy in KJ Jefferson who's a little bit bigger. You're going to have to, just talking with Savion Jones yesterday, they're talking about hitting him lower. They're going to have to get into his midsection to bring him down. They can't go up high and tackle high and expect to bring him down to the ground. So, if the front seven, my whole thing here is if the front seven can continue to apply the kind of pressure that it did last week against Mississippi State, then I think that it helps everybody. It helps secondary and their matchups downfield. It helps, obviously what the coverage plan is downfield with some of those bigger receivers that Dylan was talking about. And I just feel like LSU's in a really good spot, and defensively right now, I think they're playing guys at the right positions and having a lot of success with the kind of scheme that they're running. And I think LSU is going to be a really tough matchup for Arkansas's offensive line. I think that's going to be kind of the battle of the trenches is going to be really where this thing's won for LSU, and certainly that extends to what the defensive line is able to do and what kind of pressure that they can put on KJ Jefferson.
And just some numbers. Arkansas's offensive line currently ranks 62nd in terms of tackles for loss allowed, and 79th in sacks allowed. So not what you would want to see from a Sam Pittman coach team so far.
And obviously, too, a defensive line that you have guys like you mentioned, Harold Perkins, are going to be able to pin their ears back and get after KJ Jefferson.
You mentioned Dylan, the fact that Arkansas's defense has never seen anything like LSU's offense, but what about Arkansas's offensive line? I mean, they haven't probably seen anything like what they're about to face this weekend with Mason Smith and Wingo and all these guys that are going to be coming at them for 4 quarters. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a huge matchup for LSU to win this weekend and take advantage of.
And people might be expecting, like the Harold Perkins of last year. It is important to note that LSU was facing backup quarterbacks last year. They did not face KJ Jefferson. They were facing, like a Malik Hornsby, and I can't remember the other guy's name, to be honest, but it wasn't KJ Jefferson. So that's all it is. Like that is something to think about whenever you're going into this game. But also, that game was in like negative 25-degree weather, it seemed like on TV. So who knows?
Well, let's get to the predictions and kind of final thoughts, guys. So, we'll go 2 minutes or less with each. I'm going to put you on the clock here. Glenn, we'll start with you. Your predictions and final thoughts. I know that's a lot of points that Vegas is giving LSU in this one. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit closer. I don't know that they're going to cover that 17, 18 point spread, whatever it ends up being by Saturday. I kind of think it's going to be more in the range of 35-24 LSU, maybe 38-24. Maybe they get to 2 touchdowns, but to go 3 scores, I think would probably be a little bit too high for me personally. But I still think that still shows you that this is a team that's capable of dominating an SEC opponent, and certainly at home that's going to provide some challenges. But I like where LSU's mindset's at. I think that they've really figured out some key elements in terms of their identity as a team on both sides of the ball. I think that they're playing the right guys. They're getting the most out of most of their players that are out there. I think another part of this that has to be brought up is what happens nickel this weekend with Sage Ryan and Ryan Yates, 2 freshmen that are probably going to, or no, not 2 freshmen, but 1 freshman who's going to probably be in for a few more reps this weekend as well. So I'm extremely intrigued by just the matchup. I think that LSU has a good chance here to really continue to build on some of the positive momentum that they've had for 2 weeks now. And if you win this game and you kind of go into these next 2 road games against Ole Miss and Missouri with a nice 2-0 start on your back here in the West, I think that's about as good as you can ask for in kind of what's been a wide open conference so far, and really no clear winner of who's going to come out of the West at this point.
All right, I like it. Dylan, for you, where are you rolling with this one? Predictions, final thoughts.
Give me LSU minus the points. I'm going 38-17 LSU, convincing SEC home win before they get ready for the road trip. No disrespect to Arkansas, but I just feel like this LSU team, where they're at right now, is a better team than Arkansas, hands down. I feel like they don't really have an excuse to not handle this game. I think Arkansas, it's an SEC game, SEC home game, but they're they're in a weird spot. They have some new coaches this year. They have a lot of new players coming from all over the country, like even especially in defense. So and on offense, they have a lot of new weapons. So they're still trying to figure things out. But I think LSU is very happy with where they're at right now in terms of growth. Jaden Daniels, there's a little bit of a motivating factor in terms of Jaden Daniels threw for like 80 yards last year against this team. So, maybe a little bit of a get back factor. I think this team's confident, and I think that this team is especially getting ready for the road game, the road series, under the lights, Death Valley. LSU lost last time at home against Arkansas. So there are a couple factors here that I think LSU is gonna want to pour it on and maybe take this chance to prove, hey, we're not that team that you saw in week 1 anymore. We're a different version of this team. We are. I think they're gonna handle business. So yeah, 38-17 is my final score. LSU should be fine, and if they're not, it's a worrying loss in my opinion.
It'd be interesting. I kind of sit in between you guys in this. I think that LSU does dominate in the sense of just being able to impose their will. I think that's something they're able to carry over. I think there's going to be more pushback from Arkansas than we saw against Mississippi State. My final score prediction is 31-20. I think that Arkansas is able to kind of get a garbage time touchdown to mess with some of the people who've bet on this game. But all that being said, 31-20 is where I'm going with this one. I think LSU does win this comfortably. Maybe it's 31-13 midway through the fourth quarter. I think Arkansas's offense is going to struggle. The offensive line's concerns for me, especially against this defense and this front seven. I don't think, we talk about what happened in week 1. It's going to take another opponent that can protect their quarterback to really put stress on the LSU secondary again. And I don't think Arkansas is a team that can do that. I think we may have to see maybe an Ole Miss next week that might be able to do something like that. But hey, LSU, Arkansas, under the lights in Tiger Stadium. This is the Go 24/7 podcast. We appreciate you so much for tuning in, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, wherever you might be listening. Maybe you're on your drive into Baton Rouge for the game. We appreciate you. Check out the other podcasts we had going on in Behind Enemy Lines with Trey Biddy of hogsports.com. And if you're on the YouTube page, continue to keep those numbers climbing. 3,500 subscribers, and we are climbing. Fantastic job done by you all. It's Glenn West. It's Dylan Sanders. My name is Bryce Koon. We'll catch you next time here on the Go 24/7